This brings us to the skirmish line, our fighting formation. You have practiced this in your extended order drill, and I have explained the whys and wherefores of it in our last period on the squad. Therefore, we will not go into those particular matters again, unless you have some specific questions. But we are going to consider the when of this formation from the platoon and company point of view. To do this properly, let's drop all the way back to the beginning of the approach march. At this stage of the game, we may be 10 miles or more from the hostile position. At this distance from the enemy, the company and column of platoon columns gives us good control, sure direction, and presents a poor target to the enemy. As we come closer to the enemy and begin to receive long-range machine gun fire and more accurate artillery fire, we break down into smaller subdivisions, usually into platoon columns. In other words, we are thinning out. We are presenting smaller targets to the enemy, and we are increasing our own degree of readiness for battle. We are one step closer to complete deployment. Gradually, we come into a zone where the enemy's observation is good and where his artillery and machine guns can play havoc with anything that they can see. If we are going to live in this danger zone, we must again fan out into smaller subdivisions that can take advantage of every bit of cover and concealment available. All this time, our artillery and dive bombers have been softening up the enemy. By now, and probably while we were still in platoon columns, our machine guns and heavy mortars are working him over. Now our company mortars and light machine guns come into the picture. But if our light machine guns are going to help us out in this scrap, we've got to provide gaps in our lines through which they can fire. Once we spread out as skirmishes, we block our own light machine guns unless they are lucky enough to have positions where they can deliver overhead fire. Therefore, we stick to platoon columns and to squad columns until we are within effective rifle range of the enemy position. Throughout the approach march, platoon leaders and squad leaders seek to screen their units from hostile observation, move their units so as to evade or minimize hostile fire effect, and still retain the greatest practicable degree of control. This you must remember. We do not ordinarily open rifle fire at ranges greater than 400 yards, and we do not deploy as skirmishes until we are forced to enter the firefight in order to continue our advance. I am not going into the battle tactics of the squad and platoon at this time. That will come in a later session. But I do want every man here to understand when and why we deploy as skirmishes. Let me go over it again. First, when do we deploy? Ordinarily, we do not deploy as skirmishes until we are within effective rifle range of the enemy. This is about 400 yards. If we can get closer than that, all the better. Second, why do we deploy as skirmishes? We deploy as skirmishes when we are forced to beat down the enemy's fire in order to continue our advance. One point more. Why do we delay our deployment as skirmishes until we are forced to it by enemy fire action? There are three reasons. First, to provide gaps through which our automatic weapons can fire. Second, to enable our squad leaders and platoon leaders to retain close control of their units as long as possible. And third, to take full advantage of the faster rate of advance afforded by column formations. Is that clear to everyone here? No questions? Good.